Okay, so you wake up. It's 6 a.m. No alarm. The government radio built into your wall did that for you. You didn't ask for it. You can't turn it off. And the first thing it's playing? A song about how great your leader is. Welcome to Tuesday. Welcome to North Korea. Today, we're doing a full POV. What your actual day looks like if you were born and raised in the most isolated country on the planet. No tourists, no internet, no freedom to leave. Just you, 26 million people who are in the exact same situation, and a government that has very strong opinions about absolutely everything. And I mean everything. What you wear, who you marry, what haircut you're allowed to have. Yes, haircuts. We'll get there. Buckle up, because this is going to be equal parts fascinating, darkly funny, and deeply uncomfortable. Let's go. So, your alarm, sorry, your mandatory government radio, goes off. In North Korea, most homes have a speaker wired directly into the wall. It broadcasts state radio. You cannot turn it off. You can only turn it down, slightly, on a good day. The broadcast kicks off with patriotic music, then news about how well the country is doing, followed by updates on how much the dear leader loves you personally. Every single morning. It's like having a roommate who never shuts up, except the roommate is the state, and disagreeing with them is a felony. You get up, you get dressed. Now, clothing. This is more complicated than it sounds. Bright colors are not technically illegal, but they'll get you stared at, whispered about, and potentially reported. Jeans, specifically blue jeans, have at various points been banned or heavily discouraged because they're seen as a symbol of American cultural influence. The government has a whole thing about Western cultural contamination, so you go with something plain and unremarkable. You've always gone with something plain and unremarkable. Everyone has. Now, breakfast. And this is where your experience splits dramatically depending on one thing: where you live. If you're in Pyongyang, the capital, you might actually eat okay. The government keeps Pyongyang looking good because that's where foreign diplomats visit, where the cameras go, and where the carefully selected citizens live. Think of Pyongyang as North Korea's Instagram page, heavily filtered, meticulously curated, absolutely not representative of reality. Pyongyang has department stores, restaurants, a water park, even a ski resort. It looks almost normal if you squint and don't ask too many questions. But if you're outside the capital, breakfast might be corn porridge, or thin soup, or nothing. Food insecurity is a chronic, severe, ongoing crisis in North Korea. The UN estimates roughly 42% of the population is undernourished. But you don't know that statistic because you don't have access to the UN, the internet, or any outside information whatsoever. You eat what you have, you don't complain, and you head out. Before we get to school and work, we need to talk about the haircuts because this deserves its own segment. North Korea has, at various points, published government approved lists of acceptable hairstyles. For men, short, neat, off the ears. For women, a selection of modest cuts. Long hair on men, problematic. Anything that looks too Western or too South Korean, a problem. There were reports that during certain crackdown periods, inspectors would actually patrol streets and universities checking hairstyles and clothing. If yours didn't comply, you could be sent home or publicly reprimanded. Now, is every single person getting their hair checked every day? Probably not. But the fact that this is a real policy that real officials enforce at real times tells you everything about the level of control we're talking about. It's not just the big stuff, it's everything, down to your hair. If you're a student, school starts early. And North Korean school is genuinely one of the most fascinating and unsettling educational environments on earth. From basically the moment you can hold a pencil, a massive portion of your curriculum is dedicated to the Kim family. You learn about Kim Il sung, the founder, referred to as the eternal president, even though he died in 1994. You learn about Kim Jong il, and you learn about the current leader, Kim Jong un, their greatness, their sacrifices, their almost supernatural abilities. There are stories taught in schools, presented as fact, claiming Kim Jong il shot 11 holes in one the very first time he ever played golf. 11. First time ever picking up a club. He then reportedly retired from golf because there was simply nothing left to prove. I want you to sit with that for a second. The textbooks are something else entirely. Math problems have been documented using military framing. Not if Sally has 5 apples and gives 2 to her friend. More like if a brave soldier fires 3 rounds at imperialist aggressors and eliminates 2 enemies, educational and motivational. History class covers the Korean War. Except in the version taught in North Korea, the United States started it, North Korea was winning. And the only reason the war ended in a stalemate was because of external interference. South Korea is portrayed not as a separate thriving nation, but as an occupied territory suffering under American control, waiting to be reunified with the North. Students are enrolled in youth organizations, the Korean Children's Union, then later the Socialist Patriotic Youth League. Think Scouts, except instead of learning to tie knots and start campfires, the focus is ideological commitment, loyalty pledges, and organized praise sessions for the leadership. And here's the thing, most of the kids going through this don't think it's strange because they've never known anything else. Propaganda only works when you have no frame of reference for comparison. And in North Korea, that frame of reference is systematically removed. Let's say you're done with school, time to enter the workforce. Except you don't really choose your career in North Korea. The state has opinions about that too. Job assignment is heavily influenced by your songbun, the North Korean loyalty based class system. Your songbun is inherited from your family and assigned based on how your ancestors behaved going back to the Korean War era. Were your grandparents loyal party members? Good songbun. Did someone in your family attempt to defect, get caught listening to foreign radio, or say something critical of the government 3 decades ago? That mark follows your bloodline. It's a generational social credit score, invented in the 1950s. No app, no appeals process, no way to reset it. Your songbun determines where you're allowed to live. Only people with good songbun can live in Pyongyang. It determines what work you're assigned, whether you can join the military, which is actually seen as prestigious, what university you can attend, and even your food ration allocation. Speaking of rations, North Korea operates a public distribution system where the state distributes food to citizens, except the system has been broken and insufficient for decades. The famine of the 1990s, known as the Arduous March, killed an estimated 240,000 to 3.5 million people, depending on whose numbers you use. The government still hasn't fully acknowledged it happened. So, what actually keeps people alive? The Jangmadang, informal markets, technically illegal for years, now semi tolerated, where people trade food, goods, medicine, and services outside the state system. The government doesn't love them, but knows that shutting them down entirely would cause a catastrophic famine. So they exist in this uncomfortable gray zone where everyone pretends the rules are the rules while quietly doing what they need to survive. Here's something that surprises people. Military service in North Korea isn't just mandatory. For many people with decent songbun, it's genuinely considered an honor and a path to social advancement. Service is approximately 10 years for men and 7 years for women. Yes, 10 years. During that time, you receive military training, political education, and are deployed on various state labor projects. Soldiers are frequently used for construction, farming, and infrastructure work. The military is essentially also a massive labor force. North Korea has one of the largest standing armies in the world, approximately 1.2 million active personnel. When you're a country of 26 million people with limited resources and a government that spends an enormous portion of GDP on defense, that means a huge chunk of the population is in uniform at any given time. The nuclear program, which North Korea is very proud of and very public about, is framed domestically not as aggression, but as the ultimate insurance policy. The lesson the government learned from watching what happened to Libya and Iraq after they gave up weapons programs is never give up the weapons program. Whether or not that logic is sound is a separate conversation, but it is the logic. Okay, long day, you're home, you want to relax. What do you watch? State television, which is genuinely a television experience unlike anything else in the world. Programming includes news anchors delivering updates about the leader with the emotional intensity of someone describing a miracle they personally witnessed. Documentaries about North Korea's military strength and technological achievements. Performances by state-approved musical groups, the most famous being the Mornbong Band, basically North Korea's answer to a pop group, handpicked by Kim Jong-un himself. And dramas, lots of dramas, where the hero is always a loyal citizen or soldier, the villain is always either a corrupt capitalist or an American imperialist, and the morale is always the same. There are a few channels, all state-run, all delivering the same essential message in different formats. Now, here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Despite all of this, or maybe because of all of this, there is an enormous underground market for foreign media. USB drives and SD cards, sometimes called reeds because they're hidden in hollow reeds near the river borders, get smuggled in loaded with South Korean dramas, K-pop music videos, Chinese films, and Hollywood movies. They get passed around neighborhoods quietly, watched in secret, hidden when not in use. Getting caught watching a South Korean drama can result in a sentence to a labor camp for a drama, and yet the practice is so widespread that the government has had to pass multiple new laws specifically targeting it and conduct repeated crackdowns with street level inspectors, which tells you everything about how effective those crackdowns are. People want to see the outside world. That desire is apparently impossible to legislate away. Defectors who've spoken about this describe watching South Korean dramas and slowly realizing, over many viewings, over months, that South Korea wasn't the poverty stricken American occupied wasteland they'd been taught about in school. It looked fine. It looked better than fine. And that realization, that slow crack in the worldview, is often what starts the process of someone deciding to leave. Let's do a rapid fire breakdown of some rules that exist in North Korea right now. You cannot leave the country without government permission. Attempting to cross the border without authorization is a serious criminal offense. Being caught near the Chinese border without a clear explanation is enough for detention. You cannot own a mobile phone with international connectivity. Domestic smartphones exist and connect to a closed national intranet, a North Korea only network with state curated content. No Google, no YouTube, no falling down a Wikipedia rabbit hole about medieval siege weapons at 2 a.m. Just approved websites, approved apps, and approved information. You cannot criticize the leadership, obviously, but the enforcement mechanism is what makes this truly chilling. North Korea operates an extensive network of informants. Neighbors report on neighbors, co-workers report on co-workers. In some document cases, family members report on family members, not necessarily because they want to, but because failing to report something you witnessed is itself potentially a crime. The result is a country where, even in private, people self censor because you never fully know who might say something. The political prison camp system, Kwanliso, is estimated to hold between 80,000 and 120,000 people at any given time, according to human rights organizations. Sentences operate on a three-generation punishment principle. If you commit a political crime, it's not just you who goes. Your parents go. Your children go. 3 generations sent together to camps where conditions are, based on survivor testimony, extraordinarily brutal. This is the system that keeps the whole thing running, not just fear of punishment, fear of what happens to everyone you love. There are approximately 35,000 North Korean defectors currently living in South Korea. Many others have settled in other countries. The ones who've spoken publicly give us the clearest window into what daily life actually feels like from the inside. Common themes: the exhaustion of constant vigilance, never knowing fully who you can trust, the cognitive dissonance of being told your country is a paradise while quietly experiencing evidence that it isn't. Several defectors have described the moment they first saw real abundance in China or South Korea, supermarkets full of food, and their immediate assumption being that it was staged, a government display, fake, because their entire life experience had told them that this level of abundance wasn't real, that their country's struggles were normal, that everywhere else was worse. Rewiring that takes years. Defectors frequently describe arriving in South Korea, a country with the same language, a shared history, technically the same people, and feeling like complete aliens. The culture shock isn't geographical, it's psychological. It's the gap between a worldview built from birth and reality. One defector described watching a nature documentary, not even something political, and crying because the simple existence of information freely available about the world presented without an agenda was something she'd never experienced before. That's the part that makes this more than a geopolitical curiosity, more than funny propaganda and weird haircut laws. Real human beings are living inside this system right now, today, with no ability to opt out and no frame of reference for what they're missing. Here's the thing about North Korea that gets lost when you're watching clips of synchronized military parades or reading about the absolutely unhinged propaganda. The people there didn't choose this. They were born into it, and the majority of them have never known anything different. The government radio wakes you up at 6 a.m., and you don't question it because you never had a morning without it. You don't know what you're missing because the information about what you're missing has been systematically removed. And the system sustains itself not just through fear, but through the genuine belief of many of its citizens that this is simply how the world works. That's what makes it so effective and so tragic. So, next time your Wi Fi is slow, or your government does something you disagree with and you vent about it freely on the internet, or you scroll through 17 streaming platforms complaining there's nothing to watch, just remember somewhere, a government radio is playing on a wall that someone can't turn off, and they're just trying to get through Tuesday.